I'm Steve Wood, recovered alcoholic. Welcome to Big Book Compendium. So we've covered 40 pages so far on step one alone, more than any other step. The real reason some people, is why, let me start. The real question is why. He wants us to be convinced that we're a alcoholic and beyond human aid. And that's one thing. And like I said before, in the study is to fully surrender innermost selves. So we're on page 35. So last week we ended on page 35. So ending on page 35, there's a question that will be answered later on. Well, let's just see what it says. It says, what sort of thinking dominates an alcoholic who repeats time after time the desperate experiment of the first drink? So, desperate's a big word. I mean, frantic, ancient, worried, just desperation. The desperate experiment of the first drink. So we'll answer that question later. And notice it says how many times we have tried, time after time. So let's see what it says. It says, friends who have reasoned with him after a spree, which has brought him to the point of divorce or bankruptcy, are mystified when he walks into a saloon. Why does he do this? And of what is he thinking? Yes, they have said that. So the story, so this chapter begins like, the stories we read earlier are pretty cool. I mean, the guy who leaves alcohol alone until he's retired and all that was okay, but it's hard for us to relate with that one as much. These stories we're going to cover today, there's 3 of them. And these ones really hit home with me. And this one is Jim. Jim is a guy named Ralph Furlong. And Ralph Furlong also has a story in the first edition called it's called Another Prodigal Story. So his name's Ralph Furlong, the real name of Jim. So our first example was a friend we should call Jim. This man has a charming wife and family. He inherited a lucrative automobile agency. He had a commendable World War record. He is a good salesman. Everybody likes him. He is an intelligent man, normal so far as we can see, except for nervous disposition. All these guys in these stories talk about the nervous disposition. The man of 30 did. And what they're talking about is being dry. It's not detox. Some people confuse with detox, or they're just like, it's the best way to describe that is the restless, irritable, and discontent. And it's the high anxiety, easily pissed off, never satisfied, easily annoyed, never satisfied, whatever you want to call it. But the high anxiety, then they're not separate. One doesn't happen after the other, they all happen together at the same time. And that's the classic dry drunk. That's our dry state. So see what it says. He did no drinking until he was 35, so he's a late bloomer. In a few years, he became so violently intoxicated, he had to be committed. Some might relate with that. And remember, again, the asylums, what the asylums they talk about in here it was an ugly, ugly time on this planet, period. And a lot of alcoholics, the only place they could do, because they were sinners, they were thieves, they were scum. Let's get them off the streets altogether. That's always been kind of the solution, is to hide the problems, that we visit, that we see. And that was why they created inebriate asylums in the US in the 20s. And it was so they could do whatever they could, lobotomize and alcoholics, but they'd keep them in the system. It says, on leaving the asylum, he came in contact with us. We told him what we knew of alcoholism. And basically what they probably said was, Jim, you have an obsession of the mind that condemns you to drink against your will. And you have when you drink, a craving develops and you lose all control once you start the allergy. Something in that form, probably more deeper and longer, but that's exactly what they hammered. And the answer they had found. So the answer they had found, they spoke of a discovering God as a result of a program of action, steps 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 4 through 9. It sounds rather simple when I say that. Sadly, it isn't, because so many we explain 4 through 9 to. They might look in our eyes and say, hey, I'm going to do it. And they don't. I mean, we've pretty much all agreed that people we've sponsored over the years, we've had more, it's amazing the people that we think are going to make it and they don't, and the ones we think, oh, this guy's never going to do the work, and then they do. So, but let's see what, so here's the important words here. It says he made a good beginning. That means he made a third step decision to turn his will and life over to care of God. Remember, it's a decision, right? Around the same time, look what happens to him. So he makes a third step decision around the same time. His family was reassembled. He begins to work as a salesman for a business he had lost through drinking. So let's talk about that job for a second. It says early on he inherited it. And so now he's going back there to work. So let's just say he's a CEO. He was a CEO of the company, like running the whole company. He gets fired from his own company because of his drinking. And then he gets sober and they're like, you know what? Let's bring him back. He's doing good. Let's just make him a salesman. And do you think that he might be a little resentful and embarrassed being the former owner of the company and returns as a salesman? My sponsor would say, how's that going to work out? Let's follow along. All went well for a time. How many times have we heard that? It says, but he failed to go to enough meetings. No, it's not what it says. But people will say when people relapse that they didn't go to enough meetings. Majority of people are, when anyone relapses, so a guy's going to 4 meetings a week and he relapses, I need to go to more meetings. But what step are you on? Oh, I'm still on step 2, and it's 9 months into it. Here's the real reason it says in the book why 95% of people relapse. All went well for a time, but he failed to enlarge his spiritual life. Failed to enlarge it. He might have done a sincere step 3. He may have met it with his heart, but he stopped in a decision. The decision is just, about the decision, it's just a thought process prior to taking action. It's where you weigh something out and should I do this or should I not? And you really think about it. We tend to do that a little bit better when our mind is of sound, but meaning nothing has changed. And if nothing changes, nothing changes. He never took action. He's just sitting on a decision. Nothing changes, nothing changes. The insane mind is still there. The obsession is still there. He is probably restless, irritable, discontent, before he, even did step 3. And before he could even, probably around the same time he was ready to start forward, like writing and stuff, he gets his wife back, his kids back, and a job back. It doesn't matter that fear and resentment is running his life all of a sudden. But before that, he didn't have the kids back. He would go to any lengths, right? That's what he said. He isn't aware. He just isn't aware, and in his mind, life's great. If everything out here looks good, why work on inside? That is part of the illusion. All we're going to do is fulfill our instincts. Think about. He just started that new job, and like I said, how's that going to work out? He just got his family back. That's a lot of work to be done. What a great time to stop working on step 4. What a great time. I remember when I was doing my 4th step, it took me about 10, maybe I was on like the 4th day of writing, and I called up my grant sponsor. I went to his book study. I was telling him about some drama, and he goes, when you started this conversation, you said you hadn't written your 4th step in 3 days. He goes, do you see a connection there? He said, what a great time to stop writing step 4. And it's like, let's see how it works out for Jim. To his condemnation, he found himself drunk a half dozen times in rapid succession, 6 times back to back to back, right? On each of these occasions, so they're saying there, he got drunk, went back to some, got drunk, went back on each, or maybe at home they talked to him, but on each occasion it doesn't say, it's not going to tell us that on each of these occasions went to him and told him he's fired, he can no longer work with us. No, on these occasions they worked with him, reviewing carefully what had happened. And the reason I throw that in there at the beginning is I've had guys come to me and say they relapsed and their sponsor fired them. I've never fired anybody, but on each of these occasions we work with them, and these guys never fired anybody either. Reviewing carefully over what had happened. That's our job. So every time he drank, they met with him and they hammered home the allergy obsession more and more and more. He agreed he was a real alcoholic, so he in a serious condition. So he took step one. He knew he would face another trip to the asylum if he kept going. Moreover, he would lose his family, from whom he had deep affection. There's a strong reason right there. Unfortunately, the obsession doesn't respond to reason. Yet he was drunk again. We asked him to tell us exactly how it happened. This is his story. So right there's a powerful motivator to stop drinking, that if you don't have an allergy obsession, you can stop. But you see how reason did not hold him in check. He loved his family, but the obsession won anyway. So before he's going to tell us, let's just do a quick review of this guy real quick again, just so we get everything in tied together. So he has a good life. He has a wife and family that he loves, a money-making automobile agency. He has a World War I record, so that's World War I. And when you did that in the US, you get a little kind of like a badge type of thing. And if you went to restaurants and stuff, you got free food and you were a war hero. Big deal. It was a big deal to a lot of people. Everyone likes him. He's a smart guy, but then he has that restless, irritable discontent. He gets violent when he drinks. So he loses that inheritance that he obligates to get inherited. He loses his family. He goes to rehab. He gets sober. The sponsor explains him allergy obsession. Some of us may have been through this before. And they explain the spiritual solution. He does the third step, but he gets his family back and the kids back and the car back and whatever else back. And all is going great, except he does not take action, meaning he did not do 4 through 9. You see the powerful lesson they're telling us here. He failed to enlarge his spiritual life, and he got drunk over and over again, and they hammered home step 1 again. So here's what happened. And as we go through this, I am going to point out just how selfish this guy is. He's concerned with his own needs, and what that means, he's selfish. He's concerned with his own needs and wants, and little concern for others. And I'm going to show that by his personal pronouns. He's going to say I a lot, so I'm going to say I with strong emphasis, because I came to work on Tuesday. I guess he forgot to come on Monday. A typical drunk. I remember I felt irritated. What's another word for irritated? Resentment. I felt resentment that I had to be a salesman for a concern I once owned. Did he say? He doesn't say, being honest with myself, I worked a spiritual program. I did inventory and saw that my own selfishness was, I caused the resentment and let it go. See, that's what happened if he was continuing the action, or he talked to his sponsor, but he didn't. So let's see what happened and keep the eyes going. I remember I felt irritated, concerned I once owned. I had a few words with the boss, nothing serious. Alcoholics always downplay their resentments and the action they take out on them. So a few words with the boss, his boss is probably used to be one of his employees, probably one he hired. And, here's how I believe it went. I went to, he went to the boss and says, well, here's how I would do it. And he's all, you're not in charge anymore. And then Jim's like, well, after you, I'm out of here. Just a few words to the boss, nothing serious. So then he decides to drive into the country. Now he has a resentment. What's driving him is the resentment, but we don't really see yet is the obsession. Then I decided to drive into the country and one of those prospects for a car. On the way, I felt hungry, so I stopped at a roadside place where they had a bar. That's convenient. I had no intention of drinking. I thought I would get a sandwich. I also thought, a lot of eyes in there, had notion that I might find a customer. Cell centers is really driving them for a car at this place, which was familiar for. I had been going there for years. I had eaten many times during the months I was sober. I sat down at a table and ordered a sandwich, and I ordered a glass of milk. Now here's the important stuff. Still no thought of drinking. So some people might think he's being overly breaking it down, but it's very important, the message he's getting across here. I ordered another sandwich and decided to have another glass of milk. So his mindset prior to the first drink is selfishness, self-centeredness, resentment, and we're going to see what else. Here comes the italic writing. Now, this is a smart guy, very intelligent guy. You can tell just by the description of him. Let's look at his best thought he had to combat drinking. Suddenly a thought crossed my mind that if I were to put an ounce of whiskey in my milk, it wouldn't hurt me on a full stomach. Wow. That obsession takes over him. He didn't think of his family. He didn't take out his phone list to call the list they give you, the A Fellowship Service Center. He didn't call his sponsor. He didn't remember his triggers, all that. No. I ordered a whiskey and poured it into my milk. Now look at this. I vaguely sense that's a strange mental blank spots. I was not being too smart. So he vaguely sensed that. But I felt reassured as I was taking the whiskey on a full stomach. At least he reassured himself, the experiment went so well. I ordered another whiskey and poured it in my milk. Now the allergy is kicking in. So once he had that alcohol in his body, the obsession and resentment and all that were driving him the whole day. He didn't even see it. And now the allergy is going to drive him because he put the alcohol in his body. That didn't seem to bother me, so I tried another. Now it's really running off, right? Thus started one more trip to the asylum for Jim. He had, this guy had sound reasoning why he shouldn't drink. Let's look at some of them. They're going to tell us again. Here was a threat of commitment, the loss of family and position, to say nothing of the intense mental and physical suffering which drink always caused him. He had much knowledge about himself as alcoholic, allergy, obsession, yet all reasons for not drinking were easily pushed aside in the favor of the foolish idea that he could take whiskey if he only mixed it with milk. I mean, it's just insane, but it's like, you see the insanity of the first drink, the resentment, the selfishness. He felt reassured as he was, and not taking it on a full stomach. The first time I read this story, I thought well, I don't do that. And then the next time I read it around mid 96, 97, it fascinated me because I did. Not just because this guy believed he wouldn't get drunk by putting whiskey in milk. What fascinated me was he didn't remember all the reasons why he shouldn't drink. I realized I had done the same thing, and all the reasons, they never exist. He did not say to himself at all, I might lose my family, my wife. This might cause me physical suffering, might cause me a bad detox, could wind him in jail. He definitely did not say, I'm alcoholic, it just won't turn out well. Nothing came to mind, nothing. That's a strange mental blank spot. Let me talk about the strange mental blank spot. So the strange mental blank spot is when we're supposed to raise this defense, and sound reasoning and common sense is supposed to kick in. Self-knowledge, it does not. And it fascinates me. I was a counselor for quite a while, and it fascinated me, even the rehabs I worked at, how they would want to teach alcoholics self-defense. Yet our big book tells us defense is not going to work. It says strange mental blank spot's going to win. The obsession's going to win. Sound reasoning, common sense does not exist. So this basically, the story nails the real alcoholic's thinking prior to drinking. A realization that so insane that can only come from an alcoholic mind. I mean, his obsession was bad. That's the best thought that he could come to his mind was mixing whiskey with milk on a full stomach. Won't hurt me on a full stomach. But that's what we do. We have an obsession so strong, so powerful, it takes insane rational thinking and replaces it with, it takes sane rational thinking and replaces with insane irrational thinking. From sound, a sound mind to unsound thinking really quick. So Jim's story is what we call in the AA fellowship who do the steps, the 1, 2, 3 shuffle. So a real alcoholic does the first 3 steps and is ready to start 4, but gets the girl back, the kids back, and the car back, and all that. So I've seen it happen firsthand. You know, they don't see the need to change. They got everything that back they need because they don't take action. They're still maladjusted to life and unmanageable and restless, discontent. The only significant thing they've done is not drink, and their mind is more tortured every day. And they see eventually they will seek out the ease and comfort that comes at once by taking a few drinks, like anyone would, to feel better. But we can't take alcohol to feel better, to medicate ourselves, because we have an allergy. But then we have an obsession that tells us, who, you know, doesn't remind us at all that we have the allergy. So remember what it said on page 35. Let's go back 35 real quick again, where it says, what sort of thinking? What sort of thinking dominates an alcoholic who repeats time after time the desperate experiment of the first drink? Now let's go back to where we were, 37. Sorry for the bouncing around, but back to 37. Let's get answer that question. The answer is at the end of it. Whatever the precise definition of the word may be, we call this plain insanity. And here's the definition of insanity. How can such a lack of the proportion ability to think straight be called anything else? So insanity is a lack of the proportion of the ability to think straight. And, you know, I mean, proportion would be like the amount or quantity, you know, the right amount, you know, to think straight. The lack of proportion of ability to think straight. Just powerful writing he does, you know, think straight. How can such a lack of proportion of ability to think straight be called anything else? You know, that is why step 2 says, came to believe a part of our state could restore us to sanity. We need to be awakened. Insanity is more than just putting whiskey in milk or drinking, knowing you will lose your family and friends. Again, you know, it's knowing all the you're drinking again, knowing all the consequences involved. That's why alcohol is cunning, baffling, and powerful. We drink knowing all the consequences. Drinking again, knowing we have the allergy, all that stuff, like detox, and I have a heart attack again. So insanity is knowing you suffer from an illness that human power cannot overcome, and then try to overcome it with human power by maybe going to meetings, maybe calling friends and telling them how you feel and all that stuff like that. When that doesn't work, we treat the insanity with alcohol. Hitting, you know, it's like hitting ourselves over the head with the hammer to get rid of the headache, like it says in this book. But I want to remind you again, insanity cannot overcome insanity. Self-will cannot overcome self-will. So, you know, the problem, the mind that created the problem will never solve it. You know, it's the same, sick mind can heal sick mind, and go on. But insanity will, you know, will tell you that you're okay, and you can do that. Let's go back to the book. It says, you may think this is an extreme case. Is it really? Not really. To us, it is not far-fetched. For this kind of thinking has been characteristic of every single one of us, not some of us, every single one of us. We have sometimes reflected more than Jim upon the consequences. And sometimes even some of us had even crazier reasons why we drank than putting whiskey in milk. But there was always the curious mental phenomenon, the obsession, that parallels with our sound reasoning. I love that. Parallels our sound reasoning that invariably ran some insane, trivial excuse for taking the first drink. Our sound reasoning failed to hold us in check. You know, doesn't respond to reason. The insane idea went out. Next day, we asked ourselves with all earnestness to say, how could it could happen again? You know, always has been there. That incomprehensible demoralization. How did this happen again? My God. How did it happen again? You know, even more insane than that is I would feel the obsession coming on, and my obsession would tell me, well, there's one way to get rid of this obsession, go drink. And it's a lie. You know, crazy. In some circumstances, we have gone out deliberately to get drunk, feeling ourselves justified by nervousness, anger, worry, depression, jealousy, and the like. But even in this type of beginning, we were obliged to admit that our justification for a spree was insanely insufficient in the light of what always happened. We now see that when we began to drink deliberately instead of casually, there was little serious or effective thought thought during the period of premeditation of what the terrific consequences may be. So the big book has lots of stories in here, and that's just one of them. But and there's powerful stories that we've read, and there's the minister's son. There's a guy accepted the money from a bitter hated business rival. All this one's man at 30. Jim's story we just read. Fred's story, which we'll read to close the meeting. But this is my personal favorite, the Jaywalker, because it's so crazy. It's a parable. It's not a story. It's a parable. It's a modern dictionary will tell us a parable is a short story designed to teach a moral principle. But in the 1930s dictionary, this book was written, a parable is a short story using everyday events to teach a moral lesson or spiritual truth. And that's exactly the point of the Jaywalker. It's using an everyday event, jaywalking, so that the reader can get a more deeply understanding insanity. But see, this parable is not meant for us to relate with the Jaywalker. Its purpose is to understand the person's mindset prior to jaywalking. So, let's take a look at it. Our behavior is absurd and incomprehensible, means unintelligible, with the respect the first drink as an individual, let's say for a passion or an obsession, you could say, let's say for jaywalking. So let me explain this real quick. So the term jaywalker started in the New York area, because New York was like one of the big first cities in the United States. And outside of it was pretty much outback and a lot of what we call country people or hicks, whatever they call them. But they call them back in those days, they called them Jays. And the Jays would come into the big city and they'd never seen lights before. This is early 1900s. They'd never seen lights before. They've never seen cars before. And so they would wander out in the middle of the road. And so the guys would roll down their windows and say, Jaywalker, or they would warn someone there's a Jaywalker. So this term just stuck. So it's pretty interesting. It's the origins of that word. It's really someone that's never been to the big city before. It doesn't, So the modern definition of jaywalking is very interesting. It says to cross the street unlawfully. But 1930s dictionary, which I recommend to get, if you can get one who crosses the street endangering themselves and the lives of others. The old definition perfectly emphasizes the jaywalking as being dangerous. He's not only putting his life in danger, but the life of others, but also the lives of others. Does he care? Is he going to say to himself before he jumps off the curb, I might really hurt myself this time, another person? Does knowing is dangerous stop? And let's see. The one thing about let's just go back to the book. I was going to say something, but he gets a thrill. That means a buzz. It's what we like to, out of skipping in front of fast-moving vehicles. So is he really obsessed with jaywalking, or is he obsessed at getting past a car? He's skipping right in front of the car, like diving in front of it to see gets a thrill. He enjoys himself for a few years in spite of friendly warnings. Up to this point, you would label him a foolish idea, having queer ideas of fun. Strange ideas of fun, what they're saying there. Bizarre. Luck then deserts him, and he is slightly injured several times in succession. You would think if he were normal, I would underline that, to cut it out. So here's a guy that gets this thrill, not just, like I said, not just jaywalking, but moving in front of the fast car. He gets a rush out of it, just sneaking right up to the curb and jumping right in front of it. And he's not going to hurt. And then he does, And, he does not say to him, does he say to himself, wow, that was close? He goes out there and does it again and again and again. And he gets warnings from friends, ominous warnings that he fails to heed. But then he gets hurt over and over again. It's a rapid succession. So let's just hypothetically say he breaks an ankle, or he breaks his arm, or he just gets bruised up. A normal person, even if he got bruised, would say, I'm done with this stuff. This ain't fun. I mean, how many people they got on top of a ladder that fell? Maybe broke an ankle or twisted, and then they'll never go up and ladder again. And if they do, they get anxiety, right? Not this guy. Let's see if he's normal. Presently, he gets hit again, and this time gets a fractured skull. So now he gets this life-threatening injury to the fractured skull, which probably causes bleeding of the brain. Does that stop? Is that almost dying stop him from jaywalking? And even if he is he even going to remember before he does it again that he almost died? Let's see, and let's also see if we can figure out if he's normal or not. We haven't really answered that yet fully. Within a week after leaving the hospital, a fast-moving trolley breaks his arm. So you mean to tell me that, on his way home from the hospital, he gets a fractured skull? How many times have we sponsored someone, or even done it ourselves, where on the way home we drank from a rehab? This time he gets a fractured skull, almost kills him, and he jaywalks again. Of course he did. I guess that answers the question if he's normal. Because a normal person, if they got a fractured skull, jaywalking like he's doing, and almost died, they would never put themselves in that situation ever again. And what happened to him last time didn't even come to mind. He didn't think of one consequence at all. See the pattern with all these stories today? No consequences come to mind. Strange no blank spots. Here's more insanity to ponder. He jumped in front of a trolley, which cars, I think, in those days probably went about 40 miles an hour. A trolley was, much faster in those days and heavier. So he graduated something a little bit more tougher, like we do. But then he gets a moment of clarity. Let's see what it says. He tells you he has decided to stop jaywalking for good. So he swears off jaywalking forever. He's done. Don't jaywalk no matter what. But the big question is, can he stay stopped? Can he keep jaywalking idea out of his head? What is his mindset prior to jaywalking? Is he restless, irritable, discontent? Is he angry? He's telling, old jaywalking stories. I mean, when he's sober, away from jaywalking, and he can't get past the obsession of it. So that's his program, is just going and sharing about jaywalking stories. Don't jaywalk no matter what. Does, jaywalk no matter what work? Within a few weeks, he breaks both legs. So this guy gets a fractured skull and went from the hospital. He does it again, and within a few, he quit for good. Then he breaks both legs. And look at this. This is where this is where it gets deep. On through the years, conduct continues, accompanied by his casual promises to be careful or keep off the streets altogether. Here is the unmanageability. Finally, he can no longer work. His wife gets a divorce, and he's held up to ridicule. He tries every known means to get the jaywalking idea out of his head, the obsession out of his head. He shuts himself in an asylum, rehab, hoping to mend his ways. That's his bottom right there. He went to rehab. He can't work anymore. His wife is gone. He goes to rehab, and now he's done. Look, so what happens? But the day he comes out of the rehab, he races in front of a fire engine, which breaks his back. Such a man would be crazy, wouldn't he? The same day he leaves rehab, he jumps in front of the fire engine, even faster than the trolley. It's probably a fire engine that's on his way to a fire, knowing him. I don't mean to laugh, but it's true. He breaks his back. I mean, is it really insane? I mean, again, how many times have we known someone that drank on the way home from rehab? You may think our illustration is too ridiculous, but is it? We who have been through the ringer have to admit, if we substituted alcoholism for jaywalking, the illustration would fit us exactly. It does. Totally. However intelligent we may have been in other respects, where alcohol has been involved, we've been strangely insane. It's strong relationship isn't true. Yes. This is a perfect description of insanity. The first time I read this, I thought, this must be a joke, jaywalking. But the second paragraph where it talks, made my hair stand up, where it talked about, his wife left him and all that stuff. He nails it. Bill nails it, especially when it states like, that's, like I said, he can no longer work. All that stuff happens to him. It made me read the top paragraph again. I must have read it like 10 times that night. This is when I was really ready for the program, and a lot of things were happening at once. And, that was the last time I was in rehab. It was when I became fascinated with the big book that night. So that's why I have a strong connection to the story. And it started to understand the insanity. And I realized I was not normal. So it's a big thing to realize you're not normal. So this parable was the equivalent of a person going to rehab over and over and over again. So I related with that. You raise your hand if you've done that before. He nearly dies jaywalking, yet he keeps doing it. He's got every reason to stop. He cannot get it out of his head. Even after knowing he cannot safely do it, he does it again and again and again. And then goes in front of faster vehicles. He can read books on the dangers of jaywalking, go to 90 jaywalking meetings in 90 days, whatever. He can know all the dangers of it. He has all the experience, but he's not going to think of the consequences at all. That's scary right there. Of all the things that he's done and all his experiences, he's not going to remember any of them before he does it. That's the insanity right there that they're hammering home in this chapter. He's going to do it against his will. Again, the power of the mental obsession. The power of the mental obsession. The underlying truth that self-knowledge avails us nothing. We don't respond to reason. Back to the book. Some of you are thinking, yes, what you say is true. So this part right here, I like to look at it as me talking to a sponsee, or any of us talking to someone. Yes, what you tell us is true, but it doesn't fully apply. We admit that we have some of the symptoms. I've had guys tell me that, but we have not gone to the extremes as you fellows did, nor are we likely to. For we understand ourselves so well after what you have told us that such things cannot happen again. We all believe that. We have not lost everything as a result of drinking like you guys did. And we certainly do not intend to. This is one I get from a lot of guys. Thanks for the information, Steve. I get told that. Thanks for information a lot. It's sad. That may be true of certain non-alcoholic people who, though drinking foolishly and heavily in the present time, are able to stop or moderate because their brains and bodies have been damaged as ours were. But the actual potential alcoholic, with hardly an exception, will be absolutely, there's a tag writing, I underline it, absolutely unable to stop drinking on the basis of self-knowledge. This point we wish to emphasize and reemphasize to smash home the alcoholic readers as it's been revealed to us in bitter experience. Let's take another illustration. Before I get into this, that self-knowledge thing's a trip, because we think just because I'm in the program that I'm not going to have a thought of drinking again. And then you sit there and go, well, I'm doing really well, but what step am I on? I've had guys come back and relapse. I did all the steps. And I'm like, oh, really? How did your amends go? I didn't do those. I didn't do step 10 yet. I didn't do 11. Never did 12, never sponsored. Then you're not doing the program. So you're not doing the steps anymore. If I'm did a 4th step and 5th step and I'm stopped making amends, it's not a knock. It's just saying I'm not doing the steps. It's a formula. It's a very serious thing. If they're going to use a serious analogy as jaywalking with a guy, they're really trying to tell us something. Let's see this guy, Fred. This is going to go deeper. So this Fred's real name is Harry Brick. And he had a story called A Different Slant in the first edition. Name's Harry Brick. You'll never forget that name. Fred is a partner in a well-known accounting firm. His income is good. He has a fine home and is happily married and the father of promising children of college age. So he's got some good stuff going. He is so attractive personality that he makes friends with everyone. Wow. If ever there was a successful businessman, it was Fred. Well, this guy's got it going on. To all appearances, he is stable, well-balanced individual. Yet he is alcoholic. We first saw Fred about a year ago in a hospital where he had gone to recover from a bad case of jitters. So they first met him a year prior. So he's probably gonna fill in that blank, you know. So he didn't go to the hospital to recover from alcoholism. He went to get past the bad case of jitters, the restless, irritable, and discontent. There's that nervous disposition again. So that's what we think. If I just get past this and bring my mind back, I won't drink. That's what you tell ourselves. That's the obsession talking. It was his first experience of this kind, and he was much ashamed of it. Far from admitting he was an alcoholic, he told himself he came to the hospital to rest his nerves. So when I was a counselor, I learned this from this guy named Mike. He just passed away a few years ago. I loved him. And when I was a counselor, I took something from him. I do it with sponsees as well. The question I love asking people is, are you doing this because of consequences or because you don't like your life anymore when they walk into the rooms? And many times a guy will say, oh, it's both. And I say, no, it can't be both. It's got to be one or the other. Well, consequences. Eventually they will say, I don't like my life anymore. That's when you know they're ready. They're not there to rest their nerves. That guy, Mike, walked up to me in a meeting the first time in '97, and I knew him a little bit from my dad. And so he walked up to me and he goes, hey, he goes, are you here because you don't like your life? What consequences? You don't like your life anymore? And all, well, you know, courts and this and that. And I never forget the emotions I felt when I saw him in a meeting in 2000. And I just walked up to him and looked him right in the eyes. And I got emotional. I said, I don't like my life anymore. And he just grabbed me and hugged me. That's the beauty of the program. So that's a great question to ask. Are you here? Are you doing this because of consequences or you don't like your life anymore? The doctor intimated strongly that he might be worse than he realized. For a few years, he was depressed about his condition. He made up his mind to quit drinking altogether. Look at this. It never occurred to him that perhaps he could not do so in spite of his character and standing. So the Fred's got an ego a little bit because of his character and standing. That he wants to prove, his whole MO is to prove you wrong, right? Fred would not believe himself an alcoholic, much except a spiritual remedy for his problem. So he's not interested in the steps. Remember what I said about step one, you cannot move forward until you admit defeat. And the first two times I went to rehab, I didn't want to admit defeat, or even I had a problem. The next few times I admitted I had a problem, but didn't want to admit a spiritual solution could fix it. And when I ran out of options, I did the steps. It's back to the book. It says, we told them what we knew about alcoholism. They told him about the allergy to obsession, right? Look at this. He was interested and conceded that he had some of the problems. That's not the way it works. You don't say I have a little bit of that allergy. Remember the man at 30 said he had fully conceived? Fred only admits, I'm sorry, on page 30 it said, not the man at 30, on page 30 it said, we have to fully concede in ourselves we're alcoholics. Fully, 100%. Fred's only admits he has some of the symptoms, not 100%. That's why, you think about this book, and we'll see when we get to We Agnostics, it hammers again step one in the first paragraph. Thinking you cannot quit entirely, or we lose control once you start. And then when we think we're past step one, he does the ABCs again. He brings step one again, the ABCs. He really wants us to see this. He was convinced, but he was a long way from admitting he could do nothing about it himself. So basically he's not convinced he's hopeless. And then he's not convinced he's broken. Right. he was positive that the humiliating experience plus the knowledge he had acquired, which something he just learned, that's why it's new knowledge, would keep him sober the rest of his life. Self-knowledge and fix it would fix it. Well, let's see how it works out. I mean, his plan of recovery is to rely on a mental defense against humiliation and suffering. We've heard this all before. So if he's tried it, I tried it. He's going to remember his last drink to keep him sober when he wants to drink. Oh, I had a guy say one time, trying to remember the last drink is like you being the only batter up the plate and during a baseball. You're every player in the lineup. You might do well the first, but eventually you're gonna strike out. Eventually it's not gonna work. You might do well for a while, but it's not gonna work. You might any defense. I remember I got a rehab one time, and I was doing decent until my girlfriend and I got in a fight. And then a friend of mine saw me walking down the street, and he gave me I saw him walking down the street and picked him up. And right when he gets out of my car, he goes, "Here, take this." And he threw a bag of dope on my lap. And I sat there and I went, "No, I can't do that." That was my defense. But guess what was in my mind the rest of the day? That bag. And then after another argument with the girlfriend and her whole family, I knew exactly where I was drawn to it. And then drinking again. It's just sanity right there. So we heard no more. So let's see how it worked out. Like I said, we heard no more Fred for a while. There it is. That's how it worked out. They heard no more Fred for a while. One day we were told, maybe this is a year later, I don't know. One day we were told he was back in the hospital. This time he was quite shaky. He soon indicated he was anxious to see us. The story he told us was most instructive, for here was a chap absolutely convinced he had to stop drinking, who had no excuses for his drinking, who exhibited splendid judgment and determination in all other concerns. He was flat on his back, nevertheless. Let him tell us about it. So here's those eyes again. I was much impressed with what you fellows said about alcoholism, and I frankly did not believe it would be possible for me to drink again. I rather appreciated your ideas about the subtle insanity which precedes the first drink, but I was concerned it would not happen to me after I had learned. I reasoned I was not far advanced as you fellows. Look at that. And that I had been usually successful in licking my other problems. That's what a lot of people mess up right there. I've beaten everything in my life. I'm very successful. This is not going to beat me. And that it's that old dream the alcoholic has. One day we're just going to outgrow this. And that I would therefore be successful where you men failed. I felt I had every right to be self-confident. And it was only a matter, here's what most people do in the program. It was only a matter of exercising my willpower and keeping on guard. That's a great program. Let's see how that works out. And that frame of mind, so the frame of mind, keeping his, exercising his willpower and keeping on guard. In that frame of mind, I went about my business. For a time, all went well. I had no trouble refusing drinks. I began to wonder, this happens to a lot of people, began to wonder if I was making too hard work of a simple matter. That's a bad thought to have right there when you're trying to beat alcoholism and starting a program. Someone tells you to do the 4-step and they explain it, you go to a book study, maybe I'm making a big deal of this. Well, that's the obsession talking. One day, I went to Washington to present some accounting evidence to a government bureau. I had been out of town before during this particular dry spell, so there was nothing new about that. Physically, I felt fine. Neither did I have any pressing problems or worries. My business came off well, and I was pleased, and I knew my partners would too. It was the end of a perfect day, not a cloud on the horizon. So it's not a dark day. He didn't get pulled over and get arrested by the cops, and nothing bad happened. He didn't get in an argument with his boss. He's not hungry, lonely, and tired. It's a good day. Now, here it comes. I went to the hotel and leaves me just for dinner. Now, look at this. Here comes the italics, which is the obsession. As I crossed the threshold of the dining room, the thought, that's the obsession. The obsession came to mind that it would be nice to have a couple of cocktails with dinner. That's all, nothing less. Don't worry about it. You can have one even though it never worked before. So that's where his mental defense is supposed to kick in, to stop. He's going to remember he's an alcoholic. That's his plan. If it happens, I'm going to remember I'm alcoholic and I'll refuse drinks. All the things he learned, to take out his phone list and all that. I ordered a cocktail on my meal. Then I ordered another. Now he's on the allergy. After dinner, I decided to take a walk. Probably feeling pretty good. I returned to the hotel. It struck me. A highball would be fine before going to bed. So I stepped in the bar and had one. So for now, craving the allergy really rolling down. Now he's on a run. I remember having several more that night and plenty the next morning. I had a shadowy recollection, of course, of being in an airplane bound to New York and finding a friendly taxi cab driver at the landing place instead of my wife. Very convenient. The driver escorted me about for several days. I knew no little of where I went and what I did, where I went or what I said and did. That's the blackout. He's in a blackout. Then came the hospital with unbearable mental and physical suffering. So even the knowledge of that, he might go back out and drink. As soon as I regained my ability to think, I went carefully over the evening in Washington. Now I had not only had I been off guard, I had made no fight whatsoever against the first drink. This time I had not found the consequences at all. I mentioned being a counselor. I mentioned relapse prevention before in here, and not just, don't go to those old neighborhoods. Don't go here. Don't do that. Don't do this. So you can't talk to those old people. Triggers. This book shoots that down on page 99 and on. And right here, he just says not the consequences at all. So much for exercising his willpower and keeping on guard. The strange little blank spots went out. Look at this. I had commenced to drink carelessly as a cocktails with ginger ale. I now remember what my alcoholic friends had told me, how they prophesized that by an alcoholic mind, if you have this obsession, the time and place would come. I said to a lot of guys before, and I would drink again. I remember this guy came in and he finished his story. It was an AA meeting, and he looked right at me and said, I wasn't ready. I had it over my face. He says, if you're not willing to go to any lengths at this time, the time and place will come. As much as he scared me, I thought he was full of crap. And today I realized that full of crap was the obsession talking. I remember another time one of my friends had gotten sober, and he basically told me the same thing. And I had this, attitude. I got this. I'm like, I got this. I told him, and he said, dude, you're gonna run into a wall. My obsession did. In '96, I got a big book sponsor and told him, I'm gonna do this, and basically said the same. I thought they're all full of crap, and well, he must have saw I was full of crap right away, because when I saw him years later, I told him that, and he goes, oh, and he goes, I knew you were full of crap. I did the 3rd step prayer, and I was loaded that night. Over the years doing book studies like this, people say right to my face, you're full of crap. Some of, probably some in here tonight might think, or today might think that, or whatever time we're at. Sorry. People walked out and slammed the door, during my book studies. I'm not going to change how I do it. I've had sponsees come back to relapses and say, I just want to find out if you're full of crap, or all that stuff. All I can say is check your experience, and better yet, check your thinking. Like now, because it's very important. Back to the book. They had said, though I would raise a defense, it would one day give way for some trivial reason. That means unimportant reason for having a drink. Well, that did happen and more. Now here's the part where it shoots down all that relapse prevention and, you know, keeping a shield up. For what I had learned of alcoholism did not occur to me at all. Wow. What I learned of alcoholism did not occur to me at all. Look at that. So many go to rehab and learn everything there is about drinking and not, using. And they're told we're not to go, and the red dog and the blue dog. I don't know if you guys know what that is, but it's, your red dog is, your blue dog is where you're supposed to go, and your red dog is where you're not supposed to go. He goes to keep them in your pocket. It doesn't work. Everything they learn does not come to mind. The obsession wins. Look what he says. I knew from that moment I had an alcoholic mind. He realized he had the obsession. I saw willpower and self-knowledge were not helping estrangement or blank spots. I had never been able to understand people who said they're hopelessly defeated. I knew then it was a crushing blow. Self-reliance was crushed. Two members of Alcoholics came to see me. They grinned, which I didn't like, and then asked me if I thought myself alcoholic and if I really licked this time. I had conceded to the propositions. He fully conceded. They're saying they pile up on heaps of evidence to the effect of an alcoholic mentality, such as I exhibited and watching, was a hopeless condition. They cited cases out of their own experiences by the dozens. This process snipped out the last flicker of conviction that I could do the job myself. Fred took step one. Remember when I said, if you don't do it 100%, you can't go on. This guy said he liked the steps. He saw they had good moral values, but he did not like the idea of powerlessness. So he was going to, prove them wrong. And now he's he's not going to do the program, but now he is. They outlined the spiritual answer in the program they have found, 4 through 9, which hundreds of them had followed successfully in recovery. Though I had not only been a nominal small church member, the proposals were not intellectually hard to swallow. But the program of action, 4 through 9, though entirely sensible, was pretty drastic. Now look at this. It meant, and radical, it meant I would have to throw several lifelong conceptions out the window. That's not easy. Maybe those conceptions are, my God is the only God. My way is the only way. God's out here. God's this, God's that. Maybe it's with forgiveness or honesty or confession or amends or whatever. Look what he says. But the moment I made up my mind to go through with it, I had the curious feeling that my alcohol condition was relieved, as in fact it proved to be. Wow. Sounds familiar. Go to page 14 with Bill. I like to kind of counter with this one because it's the same idea. So page 14, where it says, these were revolutionary and drastic proposals. These were revolutionary and drastic proposals. But the moment I fully accepted them, the feeling was electric. There was a sense of victory, followed by a sense of peace I'd never known. There was an utter confidence. I felt lifted up as though a great clean wind mountaintop blew through and through. God comes a movement, and gradually his impact on me was sudden and profound. It's, back to the book. So, the thing is, I think it's similar to what I said before. Both these guys just kind of wipe the table clean. I had the thought of the new God, of the old God with the white beard and, and up in the clouds, and the God that I was just introduced that is within. And I had expectations. I had to wipe them both clean, and it happened what I had the curious feeling once I wiped that clean. Back to 42. Quite as important was the discovery that spiritual principles, 4 through 9, would solve some of my problems, not all my problems, all. I have since been brought into a way of living which is infinitely more satisfying, and I hope more useful than the life I lived before. Look at this. My old manner of life by no means was a bad one, but I would not exchange my best moments for the worst I have now. I would not go back if I could. Here's the thing. You would have to experience the world of the spirit, to compare it to your old life. You have to enter the world of the spirit to where, you're not going to know what an old life is until you enter the world of the spirit. And you look back and go, wow, what happened? And you just want more. You want to go deeper into the steps. Fred's story speaks for itself. We hope it strikes home to the thousands like him. He had felt only the nip of the ringer. Most alcoholics have to be pretty badly mangled before they commence to solve their problems. That's my experience. Pain's a touchstone to growth. Many doctors and psychologists agree with our conclusions. One of these men is Harry Thibault, staff of the world-renowned hospital, recently made this statement. This is pretty deep. What you say about the general hopelessness of the alcoholic's plight, in my opinion, is correct. Not a lot of people would say that about, because it's deep. It's a radical movement. As two of you men, that he's talking about Roland and Bill Wilson, whose stories I've heard, there is no doubt in my mind you are 100% hopeless. There it is. Human power. Apart from divine help. Had you offered yourselves as patients at my hospital, this is one of the top doctors in the world, psychiatrists in the world. Had you offered yourself as patients at this hospital, I would not have taken you. If I had been able to avoid it, people like you are too heartbreaking. This disease will break your heart. It will. It will. But on the flip side, there's nothing more beautiful than what we do. Though not a religious person, I have profound respect for the spiritual approach in such cases as yours. For most cases, there is virtually no other solution. And look at this. When I say there's no solution, that's beyond human aid. So now they're going to ease us in to away from the symptom of alcoholism. Once more, the alcoholic has, at certain times, has no effective mental defense against the first drink, except in a few rare cases, neither he nor any other human being can provide such a defense. His defense must come from a higher power. So what he's saying, what it means is this. We can have all the self-knowledge in the world about alcoholism. I can know the big book page by page. I can know about my condition. And it isn't enough to stop the first drink. Human power cannot help us. Not our parents, not our wives, not our family, not our friends, not other people at meetings. Not our spiritual advisors, our sponsors, our mentors, but most importantly, our own. But God can. We must find God. I'm going, to tell you a big secret. You already have it. All you have to do is seek it. That's the beauty of it. All you have to do is seek it. This is not a program of not drinking. It's a program about finding God so we can get rid of self. There's no way of completely getting rid of self, and that's the instinct, without God's aid. It tells us that. So next week, we're going to begin, we'll be covering next week is we're going to cover the spiritual appendix, and we're going to cover the belief index, and that's what an agnostic is, and an atheist is, and a little bit of way agnostics possibly. So I'm going to show you this is not a program of not drinking one day at a time. It's a God program. So today is the last day we will be talking about the symptom of alcoholism. From this point forward, this book study is all about the spiritual journey. It's how to properly take the action to accomplish it and keep having it happen daily, again and again, the rest of your life. This is where the book study, the rocket's about to take off, in my opinion. And it really prepares us the next 2 to 3 things we'll do, and we agnostics will prepare us for the action of the program. So we'll be back next week.